All right. Thank you all so much for joining us today. There's a few of you who are still dialing in, so we'll let you continue to do that. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for being with us. We're really looking forward to today's chat. Before we get into the details of today, which if you've registered, you know what we'll be talking about today, but just a little bit of background on us. I'm Robert Fowler. I'm the CCO and co-founder of CatalystCreativ, and we are a community design agency focused on experiences, and we use our proprietary method called the 7th level engagement framework in all that we do. Catalyst started just over 7 years ago, and we've been a fully remote team since day one. And so if you've joined our past calls, you've heard things about remote work and engagement. And if you've missed them, we can definitely share those recordings with you. Just check out our blog, which is blog.catalystcreativ, no E at the end.com, or shoot us an email to the address on your screen, which is coffee@catalystcreativ.com, and we'll send you the links to the recording. And we'll also make sure to put it in the chat here, the link to the blog, as well as that email address. A couple other little housekeeping items for those of you who are joining us by Zoom. There's a Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So if you have any questions for me or either of our panelists today, or just any questions in general about events and where you think they're going, please feel free to add those, and we'll make sure to get to those during our next 30 to 45 minutes together. So now that that housekeeping stuff is out of the way, we just invite you to just kind of sit back. If you'll take a couple deep breaths, settle in. We've got some really special guests, two guys from the team at Voray. Voray is a platform that combines curated live events and a digital community to connect you with the right people. It's been called the preferred professional development tool for executives, and we're super excited to have David and Zach with us. David's the co-founder and CEO, and Zach is the senior manager of partnerships. So thank you guys so much for being with us. The reason that we have the guys from Voray is because our missions really align. We can probably all agree that events and conferences or meetups, a lot of them just really are not that great. We talked about that a little bit on our pre-call before this. And, you know, unfortunately, that's just the reality. But us at Catalyst and the team at Voray really do not feel it has to be that way. In fact, we know it doesn't. When CatalystCreativ started just over 7 years ago, in downtown Las Vegas as part of Tony Hsieh's $350 million revitalization project, we really set out with the intention to build community. We wanted to connect people on a deeper, more meaningful level and engage audiences. And after 2 years of doing that almost exclusively in Las Vegas, those who attended our Catalyst and Creative Weeks, as we called them, asked us to start doing it for their companies. And the next thing you knew, we were creating experiences for Google and the Raiders, W Hotels, Coca-Cola, a lot of other really awesome startups that you probably may not have heard of, or maybe you have. But we also started creating experiences to engage employees, which we consider internal customers. And if you've read Amanda's book, our co-founder, The 7th Level, you'll know what I mean when I say employees as customers. But this led to experiences to engage internal teams at MasterCard and Zappos, just to name a few. So I guarantee you that many of you joined this call because, like us, you're wondering when live events are going to be back. And I really wish that I had a crystal ball that I could tell you it's going to be 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 months away, but unfortunately I don't. But what I do know is that if live events are your only source of revenue or the only way you market to your customers, that you're probably feeling like you're going to be in a bit of trouble. But I also know if you were like us, you know, in the last 6 to 8 weeks, it's been really scary, and so is the future. But good thing is we have options. And that's why we created these coffee chats. We can still build community, we can still engage our audiences, and we can continue to offer services like our remote training. But this brings me to my last thought before I get to the opinions from our panelists. It's okay to mourn the loss of in-person experiences. And I've spent most of my career living for that moment when our guests see an experience for the first time, the emails we get after an event letting us know a connection was made between two guests, or that for those of you who are in event design and production, that best sleep you've ever had the night after an event's over. So mourning the loss of these events doesn't mean we can't push forward. And that's what we're going to do. And I know that the team at Voray is going to do as well. So thanks again, David and Zach, for being here. And David, my first question is for you is, like, what led you to create Voray?
Oh, it's a good question. Be careful, captive audience here. Voray kind of started as a bit of a hobby. I had started a few businesses before Voray. I was the founder of ShopKeep, which is a cloud-based point of sale system. I ran the mergers and acquisitions group at IAC for a while, working for Barry Diller and the team there. I was on the board of Kickstarter. I've been in the tech community for a while, and I was a part of one of the founders of ShopKeep. The business grew very quickly, and we raised over 200 million in venture. So I would get invited to a lot of events, and at first I really enjoyed going to events because I'm generally an advocate for people. I really enjoyed being out of the house. I have a massive ego and a lot of insecurities. So being around people who want to meet me, that was always more fun. Um, and I had my first child, and it became very difficult to manage my time. But I still wanted to go to events. I still wanted to get out there. So started constructing events that I would want to go to with people that had the same challenges as me. So I just started throwing little dinners of my friends that primarily were growth stage founders of kind of high growth companies that had children. And by bringing these people together, we all had the same problems. And that's when I kind of stumbled on the first secret sauce of Voray, which is if I invited people to a dinner, not to sound arrogant, but if I invited other founders to dinners, they would come. So said differently, if Zach invites me to dinner, my reaction is not going to be who else is coming. I'm like, oh, Zach invited me to dinner. I'm going to show up early. I'm going to stay late. I'm pumped he invited me. If I can't make it, I have a really good reason. The nanny's sick. My wife needs me home. There's a reason. But if Salesforce invites me to dinner, if AWS, if one of my, if a wealth manager or a lawyer or one of my VCs invites me to dinner, my reaction is, yeah, you should invite me. I think very highly of myself. I have a massive ego. I'm going to show up late. I'm going to leave early. Maybe I have to return some videotapes that night. It's a nice day out. And that was the inspiration for Voray, in that we felt like we can get really good groups of people together that we wanted to meet and just help them build meaningful relationships at an event that is for them. So all of our events tend to have very specific common denominator of functional area experts that all have the same challenges, and they're being invited to attend by someone they respect, not necessarily an influencer, but somebody who's in their network, in their job. And it started as a hobby. And before long, we started doing a few hundred of them a year in 5 different markets. And now my wife is like, why can't you just have a hobby? But that's, sorry to go on and on, but that is the genesis of Voray.
No, I think that's awesome. And I think we've all been there where, someone invites you to something and you question the motive or, what is in this for me? What is in this for them? And I think that, having a platform where, and, the digging around that I've done and the experience that I have with Voray, like the fact that you guys, it's important to have that initial connection when you're there, but then also to make sure that lives on. Zach, I know that your role is particularly focused on partnerships. I'm so curious, like, how are your partners feeling right now? And how has your strategy changed to make sure your sponsors and your partners feel as connected in the digital age as they did when events were live?
No, that's a great question, Robert. One of the things that I think separated Voray in real life events is the fact that we worked with our sponsors for years to make sure they knew that the best way to generate business, to sponsor events, is really to understand that it's about building community. It's about making relationships. These dinners, these events, they're not an opportunity to kind of pitch your product, to do a sales deck, to do a pitch deck. And the hardest part about virtual events aren't bringing the groups together, but it really is about talking to our sponsors, getting them to understand how sponsoring works in a virtual world. How do you build relationships? And too many times we get an email, my email box is filled with webinars, with Zooms, of corporate companies asking me to join a webinar where they're the thought leader on a product that they're trying to sell. And I think that's the last thing we need to do. That's the last thing sponsors need to do. They have to trust event companies. They have to trust them to build events around community, build events for, our guests. And if we do it the right way, I think sponsors can benefit by being thought leaders in the space and not by, using this as an opportunity to sell and gain business development. So working with our sponsors to understand how they're trying to attack virtual events and differentiate themselves, right? I think that's the biggest question right now. How do you differentiate yourself right now in a virtual world when every, senior leader has 50 webinar requests in their inbox?
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'm so grateful for the people who've joined on this call, because I know that you have a lot of options of places to be. So we definitely appreciate you being here. We work with HubSpot agency, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with HubSpot, but they sent out something at the beginning of the week that was really talking about what you were just saying. Like, it feels a little icky right now to be marketing to some people. We all know, so many businesses are doing PPP and SBA loans, which we talked about on one of our previous calls. And so it's hard right now. And so that's kind of where these chats came from, is just like a free resource, a time in the middle of your week to kind of take a step back, to kind of pause, listen, and just kind of try to offer something for free. Because as you say, what you guys were doing and what we've been doing for years is really trying to build community. And I think that kind of leads me to my next question, is that we've all attended some of these webinars and digital events in the past few weeks. And my experience has been they've either been really good or they've been really bad. And David, my question for you would be, what do you think are a few elements that make a really good digital event?
I really don't know yet. Digital events are new for Voray. We've gotten really positive feedback on the ones that we have done. The events that I go to that aren't successful, just to start there, are when it's, to Zach's excellent points earlier, clear that there's some kind of demand gen, self-serving reason for the person to have put on the event in the first place. I find that digital events rapidly deteriorate when you have an executive officer of the company that put on the event on the panel talking to the community about things that they shouldn't even be talking about. So that's one. When you have executives who drone on and on that don't have self-awareness, it just gets boring. So what I've seen and what we've tried to incorporate that works is, we put out polls throughout the event to solicit some feedback from the people that are attending. It keeps them engaged. We use a lot of humor. We sometimes put together interesting slides, or we serve up data that's differentiated and tactical based on the goals of the audience. And that's where it really starts. It's understanding the goals of your audience and trying to give them content, humor, and influencers that are relevant to them, deliver it in a tactical form that's engaging. Also, preparation. Clearly, this call you've put preparation into. It's well organized. It's well managed. It's not a shit show of people joining. You've taken the time to make sure that it's a good user experience where people come in and out. But overall, I find that having content that is meaningful to the goals of the people joining and people who are engaging. I've been on virtual calls where they'll have a sponsor moderating a session between executives that are speaking, and you have VCs who can introduce themselves in less than 10 minutes, and it gets boring very quickly. When there's a professional moderator, someone who does a lot of moderation, someone who understands how the cadence of an event should flow and is somewhat funny, I think it works better and it keeps people more engaged.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm self-conscious to make sure I can do all of these things. So I'll try to tell a joke before the end. I love it. So, one of the things that we just mentioned as well, and it was, we're talking about all these invitations that we're getting to all these different things. Like, how do you make that invitation stand out? We've talked, some of the things that you just gave were so important for once people are on, but do either of you have any opinions about how to actually get people to join? Because as you said before, at least from Catalyst, we've seen people that have been joining these calls. The highest rate of success has been a personal invitation. So, and I can see here who's on the call. I've got my family in Georgia is on. I've got some friends that are in startups, some of our vendors for events. And so we have seen that, a personal connection, just the same way that you said, if Zach invited you to an in-person dinner. So do you think that having those personal connections, as opposed to like one huge blast being sent out from whatever your CRM is, any other thoughts that you might have about getting people to actually join?
Yeah, Robert, just jumping in real quick. I think one of the things that we do is we show everyone who's going to be a guest at the event. So seeing the other people that are listening in, feeling like it's part of a community, seeing, at our events that everyone has similar roles, similar titles from different organizations, kind of siblings at other organizations, I think is really impactful. It makes people feel like they fit in. It makes people feel like they should join. Oh, I know that person. I used to work with that person. It's a really small world in different segments, which is crazy. And I think that's what kind of adds to people accepting and joining as a guest.
Yeah, I love that. Since year one there was a festival out in Las Vegas called Life is Beautiful. It's like the most amazing display of community. It's really not your typical festival. It like incorporates music and art and learning and culinary, and it's all in the middle of downtown Las Vegas. And unfortunately, we got the news this morning that they've already canceled that for September. And a question for either of you, if you could look at your crystal ball, since I don't seem to have one, when do you think things will go back to normal for live events? And you think, what do we think that new normal will be? Like, are handshakes a thing of the past? From your perspective and the feedback that you guys have been getting, when do you think we'll be back to that?
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, our customers are just so lost and focused on demand gen. I find that B2B marketers really, really are having a tough time right now because so much of marketing has become less about awareness and the value proposition and helping your customers understand it versus just pure B2B demand gen. And events are now looked at as a new ROI marketing machine. I'm finding that marketers are completely lost with conversion on, outbound invites because they just don't know how to do it.
Right.
No matter what they do, they can't control themselves and they sound like everybody else. Every single email I get is from a company that just sounds so self-serving. And so they're all lost and they're reaching out to us. When can we have our next Voray dinner? And by the way, I only wanted to have these specific people because I don't care about people unless they kind of meet this very pure filter. I mean, that's how B2B marketers tend to think. And we don't have an answer for them, to answer your question. I don't know. I mean, I certainly, don't want to go to a event anytime soon, frankly. And it's my business.
Right.
I'm looking, when we talk about as a team, I think around, July, earliest, people will be comfortable to attend a small dinner. As far as like a large conferences, who knows? I don't think it's, and I think there's a lot of variables that are going to enter into that, from how are we going to engage as a society? If you look at Taiwan and other countries that have been successful in not only controlling, but mitigating, it's taking temperature when people enter a room. You kind of have a safe zone dynamic where there's a back-end social graph where people kind of report how they're feeling. And then there's a front-end restaurant thermometer gun when you walk in. So I think we're going to be there through the end of the year. I just don't see a future for in-person events until Q4, the earliest, is my sense. On a major scale. I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I do think there's a demand for them, though. I think a lot of event companies that are suffering, like Voray, for instance. I mean, we're an in real life person event. It's hard to say no frankly, when you have employees and when you have customers and when you get paid up front sometimes. You want to deliver the product. So you're going to see events being put on probably by companies that probably shouldn't be putting them on.
Sure. And have you guys switched your, I know you were doing in-person events similar to what we were. Obviously, you guys are putting on your own events. Oftentimes, Catalyst, it was for our clients and for our partners. And I know that you guys have been hosting some live webinars and things like that. But have you yet tried hosting like a curated smaller, like doing some sort of like a dinner or a smaller group thing with a curated group? Have you guys tried that yet?
I mean, we are trying not to do anything kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
So many executives in our community that they're not, you're not going to get the founder of Peloton or the head of corporate communications for GE to sit there and have a Zoom dinner.
Right.
But what they will do is kind of have a brief happy hour or chat like this that is specifically with people that have their exact problems, because I'm finding that executives right now are more vulnerable than they've ever been and very challenged. And they're looking for an outlet to communicate with other people just like them who have their challenges in an informal way. And to Zach's earlier point, one of the reasons why I think some of our online and offline events do convert well from the emails is we kind of go with a less is more approach, and we're very authentic in the way that we communicate. I feel like when you get these emails, it's almost thou doth protest too much. There's this long copy about everything about the event. And we just send out an email that's like, hey, 3 VCs are going to talk about the future. And you know who they are. You've been to 20 of our events. And we just invite our community. And pretty quickly it fills up. So we're not really going for hokey. I mean, if it works, it works. We're not kind of getting people together to eat dinner in front of each other. We'll have a half an hour to an hour happy hour between very specific executives who have met at our dinners or should know each other. And those tend to get very good traction, and they're more therapeutic than they are moderated. I typically kick it off, and then they all just start talking to each other about their challenges.
I love that. It's like back to Mad Men times, happy hours in the middle of the day. I'm definitely on board for that. So Zach, one of the things is, we have a lot of marketers that join our calls, and events are so important for making new connections, meeting new people, and good events really make that easy. How do we continue to connect when everything is digital? So I love what you guys do where you show who's on the calls. As you said, you're like using the chat. But how do you feel like, if you've met someone at a Voray dinner and you exchange information, you guys have the platform for everyone to stay digitally connected after. How could you continue to do that if you didn't make that initial connection and you're just possibly joining on a webinar together?
Yeah, no, great question. I think to David's point, the more cocktails, right, where it's 10 or 11 folks that are very similar, that's similar to the dinner in the sense that you can, connect, talk about challenges and kind of speak after. The webinars, a little tougher, especially since there's more people engaged. I think the bottom line is it's about solving real problems. It's about not being too high level, not being too specific, but being general enough that people can actually take stuff from it. Somebody's, thing that they've been doing for years could be another person's aha moment. And having other people kind of speak and talk to it gives them a chance to engage after. So whether it's Slack channels or Google groups or the Voray platform, just giving these folks that are very similar in title a platform to kind of engage after and moderate it is really important.
Yeah, just remember, community above anything is about questions and answers and validation through association. So that's what builds community. And on our webinars, one thing we do is we ask people to raise their hand if they have a question instead of using the Q&A tool. And when they raise their hand, we bring them in and let them talk. And then all of a sudden they're engaged as if they're in an auditorium. So that's one little thing. But to Zach's point, it's really hard to get people to build real meaningful connections virtually. You can't do it. I mean, it's hard to answer it. It's just hard.
It is. Well, and not to get political, like, being a New Yorker, I felt so grateful we have Andrew Cuomo as our leader through all this. And if anyone hasn't taken the time to listen to any of his press conferences, I hope that you do. But one of his recent conferences, he was talking about the conversations he's now having with his daughters. He's really taking the time to connect with his family, not just asking questions like, how are you? Like, what can I do for you? But really, asking them how they're feeling. I love that. I think that sometimes we're so worried about our business and our personal connection, our professional connections, that sometimes we lose sight of the connections that we have in our own homes. I'm quarantined with my husband and my good friend and our godson, and I've learned more in the last 6 weeks about, this awesome 7-year-old kid than I have, ever before in all the weekends that we've spent together over the summers. I think really looking at, who's in our homes, our families, our friends, so many of those connections we take for granted. And I think in a time when, business can be a little bit light or a little bit uncertain, just not taking that for granted. And, we have friends that are quarantined alone in their apartments, and we try to, do FaceTime chats with them. And, it's different now. And even our team check-ins at Catalyst, we used to talk about, what everyone did on the weekend. And after a few weeks of, I ate this, I went for a walk, we've now had to look at other ways to engage our team. And especially with everyone being remote, we've had to do that a little bit more. So, I think that so often I took so many invitations for granted. I didn't accept an invitation to a gathering because I was too busy. And I definitely can say that when this is done, I probably won't be taking any of those invitations for granted. But we do have some questions that have come up in the Q&A here that I want to make sure that we have time to answer. And the first question comes and it says, and either of you are welcome to answer, are there any types of events that you don't think can translate to digital?
I mean, for me, I got to tell you, it's the events. I don't think the events that we throw translates virtual. I mean, we were throwing... we've done, close to 600, over a short period of time, very curated 12 to 18 person dinners. I mean, that's primarily been the bulk of our core offering. Very well thought out, it's not experiential marketing, and it's not as probably sophisticated as what a lot of people on the call, or certainly what Catalyst puts on. That it just, nothing translates like getting a little drunk, breaking bread, and sitting next to somebody who's exactly like you with your problems. So it's hard to build real meaningful relationships with a group of people digitally, unless you're already friends with them. To your point, I love having Zooms with my friends right now. Because I see them and it's fun, and like I'll have one of my 6-year-old, a 6-year-old will be climbing on my head during it. It's hard to kind of duplicate that. I think.
Jumping in there, David, for a sec. I think even another kind of point to that is, our event, it's 3-4 hours, sometimes longer, of people, engaging, talking to each other, getting drunk. On virtual webinars, after an hour, people get bored. People are on their internet. They're kind of, even if they're still on, they're doing other things. So not having that length of time kind of hurts the building that community and building connections.
Yeah. So, one thing that I think, we've been exploring so many platforms that are out there, include from Zoom to all these other platforms. And I think that, as you say, perhaps the type of dinners that you guys have done in the past, where you're, these highly curated groups, can be a little bit difficult, but we have seen, that the positive feedback that we've gotten, from the coffee chats, and we're working on building out a couple of other digital events that are a bit more about insights and about data. One of them is all around beauty, because I do think that people are craving that connection. Abby on our team, who's our director of operations, was on a call the other day, and she said that she thought that it was going to be similar to this type of webinar where she got on and she would, just be able to listen and kind of sit back. And she was like, I was planning on prepping dinner during the call. And all of a sudden they were like, everyone turn on your camera. We're going to do this. And all of a sudden there were breakouts where she was in smaller rooms, which is a capability of Zoom, with like 4 or 5 other people where there were engaging questions. And so, she got off the call and was, pleasantly surprised to share with the team that she felt connected to these people, because especially being in HR and operations, sometimes that can be, you're kind of taking on all these problems and, everyone on the team is sort of sharing with you and, worried about PPP and worried about all these other things. But she said she felt super connected to these people that were all around the country that she didn't know. And so I think the key to doing that is to make sure that, there's smaller groups. I think, making sure that you're using the appropriate platform. I think that when you do a small group, I think that, having video is super helpful. We chose to do, the calls on this because we understand that in the time of day that it is for the East Coasters, a lot of people are having lunch and it's kind of easier out for their walk to kind of pop their headphones in. And to be candid, when we first started these calls, Zoom, was a bit unpredictable, as well as the internet in some of our locations. So we decided to keep them to phone calls. But I think when you're doing those more curated experiences, having the video, that face-to-face interaction can really help. Let's see, there's a couple of other questions. One is, are there any executives or leaders aside from yourselves in the event space that you find yourself looking to right now for their nuanced and reasoned takes on what the future of digital holds? Any resources that you guys have been leaning on? I know for me, a lot of people, a lot of our scopes were put on hold, and a lot of people are coming to us saying, when, like, when do we think this can happen? So, staying in touch with, the news, the numbers that are happening in certain places, as you said, looking at possibly Q4, a lot of people, what we've tried to do is go ahead and secure dates with, certain venues that are farther out, because I do feel like when things are lifted, people are going to be craving, that in-person connection, and that, spaces. I don't think that that the Javits Center is going to be hard to get possibly in December, in those large conference places, but, small, intimate, curated dinners, I think, hopefully, at least restaurants will be filling up and things like that. So, trying to stay on top of that has been one thing for us, but didn't know if you guys, Zach or David, have any insights or people that you've kind of been leaning on during this time.
I mean, there's 2 people I tend to follow. We went to high school together, so I think highly of him, and he's one of the smartest people I've been around. Is a guy by the name of Josh Wolf. He started Lux Capital. He's always he very balanced, provocative, to the point feedback and aggregation of data. His Twitter feed is generally very informative, frankly. And I thought Mark Andreessen's last post was interesting. I mean, it's kind of like your everyday douchey tech thing, but I thought it was informative. But it wasn't. It's not current. It's kind of
sure. Great. I love this one because I think we're all curious about this. Do you see masks becoming an integral part of live events, at least in the short term future until a vaccine? And if so, how do you attempt to normalize that visual and make it comfortable for attendees?
Great question.
Go ahead, Zach. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think, in perspective to our events, I think it's going to be hard to get people to go to restaurants in general if they have to wear masks. Especially, go to restaurants after a long day of work, to build relationships for business. I think it's going to be really hard if masks are an integral part of going to restaurants, of going to events. I think it's going to be a while for live events.
Yeah.
Someone's going to develop a mask that's made out of some special fiber and costs $15,000, and all the people who are buying $15,000 masks, we're going to want everyone to know that they have a $15,000.
That's like the designer masks that were started that everyone was going after.
Human nature is interesting. I mean, who knows what happens when it comes to optics? I find that executives, at least, are vain. So they are very, and they're also always trying to manage perception versus reality. So it'll probably be hard to get people to an event who are very senior, because senior professionals and executives tend to think very highly of themselves. And as a result, they are not going to want to go out with a cut on their face, let alone a mask.
Right.
When other chill and down to earth communities won't care
Right.
about wearing a mask. I do think it's a reality, though. My wife won't let me go to Costco anymore, certainly without a mask. And I love Costco. It's one of the reasons I moved to the suburbs. So I can't imagine going to a restaurant without a mask. And I think it's just another reason why it's going to be a very long time before we're holding dinner events.
Yeah.
To Zach's point, it's hard to get people.
For sure. We have one question for you, David. Have you and your team ever worked on any digital events in esports?
No, we haven't. It's funny. There's a lot of athletes on our cap table. It's a long story, but we tend to have a lot of connectivity with professional athletes, and it's actually a good idea. I was thinking about doing concerts because I was on the board of Kickstarter for a while. My former college roommate was the founder, and I think there's an opportunity to help distribute content in different ways than people have experienced in the past. And I think esports is certainly one of them, as is music and arts and crafts. But we haven't done anything specifically to answer that question in a long-winded way. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah. Megan asks, do you have any suggestions for tools, platforms, creative solutions for organizations that are attempting to move large-scale meetings like 15,000 plus attendees online? I'll take a stab at this one first, Megan. One thing that I think is going to be a huge resource is YouTube. I don't know if anyone tuned in on Easter for the Andrea Bocelli concert that he did, where there was like a couple million people that were live. But I think that, obviously Google owns YouTube. So for search engine optimization, I think it's great. For promotions, I think that you can easily get looped into kind of all of the G Suite stuff. I think their live platform has been proving really well to do really well. And I also think that the fact that it can live on afterwards. One of the things that we're experiencing right now is Zoom, I think, is great for the live webinars and things like this. But then, afterwards we have to download the recording, and then we have to, compress it, and then we have to put it as a link, and then we're trying to figure out where to share it and all those kind of things. Whereas YouTube, it's much more automated for something that size. Obviously there's some downfalls. Like I think the features that Zoom has where you can do different breakouts, I think that is a little bit helpful. But if you're just wanting, 15,000 people to watch one thing that's got awesome bandwidth and has great technology, I think that YouTube is a really good solution. There's also one called On24, which a lot of companies are using and sort of rebranding their backend system. And it's got a lot of amazing features that you can use for that. But David and Zach, I don't know if you guys have heard of or know of any other technologies besides the ones that I mentioned that could possibly be used for something that large.
Yeah, one of our partners, before, when we were jumping in the virtual space, we were testing a lot of different types of companies. We use Zoom for exactly the point you were just making. But for larger scale events, Intrado is a pretty good solution for that one. They're a partner of ours. And my dad happens to be the president of that company, so I would feel really bad if I didn't answer with that answer.
Yeah. No worries. Yep, we just got 2 more questions here. So if anyone has any other questions they would like answered, one of them is, sometimes it's hard for event programs to think digital is a successful way to host events, or not as technical, and lose confidence in. Any advice for those leaders or programs? You guys, I don't know if you guys have any opinions. I think that, for us, I'm making sure that I'm answering this question correctly is, I think looking to the simplest resource, I'm definitely not very technical. And so I'm thankful to have our team, Allie on our team, who's actually the host running this call. She's great. And we all, it's sort of like for us on Catalyst, it's a team, it's a huge team effort. Sometimes other team members join our webinars and things like that. So it's been super helpful to have it as a team effort.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, not everybody has Allie, who's a Zoom Jizza, obviously, but it's I think if you do a lot of testing and learning with the products, the learning curve is very high. So you can build confidence in your technical ability to hold these meetings just by doing them internally and with groups of friends first.
Yeah.
Zoom could not be more simpler to use at a basic level. And I think it doesn't hurt to at least try before you decide that it's too hard.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that right now, that people are giving a lot of grace, like you'll be on a call and you hear dogs in the background or kids or internet connections that become unstable. So I think that right now we all are trying to figure this out. Catalyst, we've been remote for, like I said, for 7 years. So we've actually created some remote training guides and things like that, and some best practices for working at home, as well as hosting, things live. So we're happy to share those if you want to email us. But I think that, and that sort of always leads me to what I say at the end of the calls every week, is that giving yourself a little bit of grace and, some gratitude is super helpful during these times. And I think that everyone is in a position to be able to do that. So with just a couple of minutes left, I just really want to thank David and Zach. If you have any other specific questions or you want to know more about Voray, we'll be sharing information about their platform in the follow-up to this. And we really appreciate everyone who's taken the time to join us. As we mentioned before, we're all getting a lot of invitations, and there's a lot of webinars out there right now. So, we really do appreciate it. Next week we have some awesome women who are joining us, who are making waves in the e-com industry. Lindsay Johnson, who's the founder of Wheezy, and Audrey, who's the CEO of CO Beauty. And we're going to be discussing the impact that COVID-19 has had on direct-to-consumer businesses and how they've had to shift their business development practices. And then the week after that, it's going to be all about foundations and nonprofits and how they're surviving during this time. So, before we go, I just ask that you all take a couple of more deep breaths, transition back into your work day. The week is officially half over now. So take the time to, as I said, give yourself a little gratitude and a little grace during these uncertain times. And please keep your questions, comments, suggestions coming. And we love hearing from you. And thanks again so much to David and Zach and the whole Voray team. And we wish you guys the best during all of this. And we look forward to having an in-person event with you, hopefully in Q4.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Well moderated. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.